And then I think there's just like murder starts to happen. I don't even totally know. So this is, I feel like this is one of those books where you can like smell the decay kind of a situation. So this one follows a documentary So 20 years ago, there was a serial killer where he was abducted and murdered. Oh no, the serial killer, let's try that again. We have a dead battery situation about to happen and I'm choking. So please hold while I change that and I'll be back. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today is going to be a recommendation slash loose TBR video for spooky season. So I am the biggest fan of fall. This is my time of year. This is when I'm in my zone. This is like where I thrive. Sweater weather, it's all of it. Layers, blankets, crisp, leaves changing colors. And you guys know, I will read spooky stuff all year long. But this definitely seems to be the time of year where other people like to get into the spooky stuff if they're not normally into it. So I pulled a bunch of books off the shelf and from my iPad, and I always forget about ebooks. Like, I don't read them a lot. I don't love the experience of an ebook, and then I forget about the handful of books that I have. So I have a few ebooks that I'm going to talk about, and then a bunch of books, like I said, that I've read and books that I would like to read to recommend to you guys, and maybe you can recommend some back to me for what to read while things are feeling extra spooky outside. So when I was trying to pick books, I was thinking sort of witchy type of vibes, definitely horror-ish kind of vibes, anything particularly thrillery or murdery or scary. So like, I feel like there's a difference between sort of like the dark and messed up, unlikable character and the story where you legitimately can kind of freak yourself out. And I'm one of those people who sort of dances the line. And I was talking to the guys I work with about this today, where, and I've talked to you guys about this too, like I couldn't watch Pet Sematary, although I watched it and had nightmares from it. But I couldn't watch a lot of scarier movies when I was younger because they terrified me. So I didn't start watching things until I got a little bit older, and then I felt like I built up a tolerance to some things, but there's still a lot of things that I shy away from. And sometimes it's the psychological stuff, sometimes it's the super gory stuff, but I've always enjoyed like dark and messed up books. So I don't quite know where my threshold is, or I don't even know what I'm drawn to or what I'm not anymore, but I'm trying to try new things. I'm all for kind of freaking myself out a little bit, as long as I can still sleep at night. And every once in a while I do hear things that go bump in the night. But anyway, I pulled a whole mess of books and I'm hoping they will give off the spooky vibes, the creepy vibes, or books that kind of like gave me the chills, or books that I'm hearing great things about, but I haven't read yet, and I have them here, so I want to read them. So the first book feels like a book every thriller lover should read, and it's The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So I know this is a Netflix show. I haven't watched it. I actually don't know anything about this, and I bought this because I feel like so many thriller writers reference it and so many thriller readers reference it, and I was like, maybe I should get on that. And then I bought it and never read it. So this book came out in 1959, and it's supposed to be the perfect work of unnerving terror. So it's the story of four seekers who arrive at a notoriously unfriendly pile called Hill House. So Dr. Montague is an occult scholar, Theodora is his assistant, Eleanor is a friendless, fragile young woman well acquainted with poltergeists, and Luke is the future heir of Hill House. So at first their stay seems to be merely a chilling encounter with inexplicable phenomena, but Hill House is gathering its powers and soon it will choose one of them to make its own. So everybody talks about it. I feel like I need to get on board with it. So another one that I hear so many people talk about, and I haven't read it yet, is Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. And this says turn fear into power. So this follows three girls, Marion, Zoe, and Val. And it says their stories come together on the island of Sawkill Rock, where gleaming horses graze in rolling pastures and cold waves crash against black cliffs, where kids whisper the legend of an insidious monster at parties and around campfires, where girls have been disappearing for decades, stolen away by a ravenous evil no one has dared to fight until now. Everybody raves about this book, and I want to know what all the hype is about. I also think it's like pretty gory. I could be making that up, but definitely on my list. And then another on my list, so we're starting with books I haven't read yet, is Wonderland by Jennifer Hillier. So you guys know, sorry, this one's got a shiny cover on it. I love her. So Jar of Hearts is amazing. That's actually like a good spooky-ish book. That one's like definitely creepy. And then I read Little Secrets. So this is one of her backlist books. And this takes place in an amusement park. I don't have a clown thing. I talked about this when I talked about hauling this. Maybe I'll have a clown thing when this is over. But this is about a amusement park, Wonderland. And I'm pretty sure there's like dead bodies and a police investigation. Yeah, it says maybe it's the dead decaying body left in the midway for all the wonder workers to see. It sounds so good. Jar of Hearts is so dark, Betty, and I loved it. So I'm definitely counting on the fact that this is the same. And we've got missing persons and it just says bone-chilling thriller. I'm so excited. So I go two ways when I hear Wonderland. I think of that movie, that indie movie from a long time ago, and it's Next Stop Wonderland, which is a T station on the Blue Line. Hey, Bostonians. Or I think of Scandal, where when Huck is sort of recapping his messed up history, and he's like, welcome to Wonderland. And then Olivia figures out what Wonderland means. Just me. I can't wait. I need to read more of her backlist. I just bought The Butcher. It's not here yet. So I am gathering her books and I'm gonna read them before her new one comes out next summer. Okay, a book I did read, House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. This was so good, you guys. This is about three sisters. They go missing on New Year's Eve when they're children. They come back like a month later in the exact spot that they disappeared from with no memory of what happened to them. And then we fast forward in time and the oldest sister disappears and her two younger sisters try and find her. And they try and retrace the steps and figure out what happened to them back in the day. And this is one of those books that's like, has 1 foot in real world and 1 foot kind of in not real world. It's so good. It's so good. There's definitely like cringe-worthy. I feel like this is one of those books where you can like smell the decay kind of a situation. It's definitely not a book to read while you're eating, but it's so well done. The characters are amazing. The writing is so good and I loved it. Next book I'd recommend is The Brightlands by John Fram. And if you can get your hands on the audio copy of this, I would do the audio because it is terrifying at certain parts. And I don't know if it would have freaked me out as much if I had read it, because the narrator of this book, when it comes to the creepy parts, is so good at creeping you out. Like I literally was like, ah, and mostly because it's like literally in your ear. Oh my God, it's so good. So this definitely has like Varsity Blues vibes in that the entire town revolves around the football team and the star quarterback, and it's like the guys want to be him, the girls want to be with him, all the adults in the town like worship him. It's all about the football. And it says the town of Bentley holds two things dear, its football and its secrets. So Dylan, who is the star quarterback, winds up going missing. And his older brother Joel was shamed out of this town 10 years ago, and now he is happily living in New York. He's gay, he's out, he has his own life, he is in a good place. He just never looked back at this town, but he's forced to come back now because his younger brother has gone missing. And right before he went missing, he called Joel, but wouldn't kind of tell him what was happening. And now Joel has like some guilt from that as well. So Joel comes back to town. He winds up reuniting with a friend of his from high school, this girl named Starsha. She's now a deputy, sheriff's deputy. And we have mysteries in the past and mysteries in the present. Her brother disappeared like 10 years ago, and there's just so much going on. There's so many levels and layers to this story, and it's like, what's real, what's not. It's so creepy. It's so messed up. I feel like there's so much, like you can enjoy this on like a super fundamental horror level, but there's also so many layers and social commentary that goes into this, and just like that hero worship thing. And I loved it. Gosh, I don't even remember. I feel like it was Gabby from Gabby Reads who talked about this last year. And I wound up picking it up again, kind of on a whim, because I was like, this doesn't totally sound like my speed, but at the same time, I'm super interested in it. I loved it, you guys. So I'm excited to read more about, or more from him, but it's definitely twisty and suspenseful. And again, that audiobook is tremendous. Okay, next up is a book I just talked about in series September, but it bears repeating. The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. This is the first in a series. The series follows the FBI agents, and this opens with this place called the Garden being discovered by the FBI, and the girls who are kept there were kidnapped by this guy who has called himself the Gardener, and he basically kidnaps girls and keeps them there for posterity, for his pleasure, and he is a completely dark and messed up guy. And we wind up going backwards and forwards in time. So we have the FBI agents interviewing one girl named Maya, who was one of the survivors from the Garden, and then we go back in time finding out how she wound up there and what life was like in the Garden. This was so dark and messed up and so disturbing, so good, but definitely crazy unsettling. It reminded me of Kiss the Girls when I heard about it. It was so much more messed up than that was. Kiss the Girls scared me in that they kidnapped women out of their homes. That's another super messed up book, but this one takes the cake. So a book I talked about in my recent book haul, Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar. This is a fiction book, but has, from what I've heard and read, a memoirish kind of a feel. So it's a little bit true crime, it's a little bit meta, and it all just sounds super amazing to me. So I haven't read anything by Richard Chismar yet, but this is the summer of 1988. Love. And mutilated bodies of several missing girls begin to turn up in a small Maryland town. I don't want to say I love that, but I love the premise. So we sort of have this grisly evidence and then the feeling that there's a serial killer in town. So we have investigation and all that stuff. And then we have recent college graduate Richard Chismar returns to his hometown just as a curfew is enacted and a neighborhood watch group is formed. So in real life, he did come home for the summer after his senior year in college while his then girlfriend, now wife, was finishing out her 5th year in school. So he self-inserts where he was at that time in his life with this sort of true crime story, fictional investigation that's going on. So it all sounds really interesting, and it's this clever, terrifying. It's the ultimate marriage between psychological horror and true crime. So he has partnered, I want to say, with Stephen King before. I didn't know anything about him, but of course started to listen to all sorts of things with him when I heard about this book, and I'm excited for it. It sounds like it could give me nightmares, which I feel like is kind of what a lot of these books are about. Another book I've had forever, which I also think is going to be a Netflix show, and it's There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. And this definitely just sounds like what it is. Someone's inside your house. So this is a YA thriller mystery situation. So this follows a girl named Makani Young, and she came to live with her grandmother in rural Nebraska. So she's been there for about a year. And then it says, but one by one, the students of her high school begin to die in a series of gruesome murders, each with increasing and grotesque flair. Okay. As the body count rises and the terror grows closer, will Makani survive the killer's twisted plan? This sounds very Scream-ish, but I've heard really good things about it. I bought this years ago, and it was one of the ones that was buried back here when I did my bookshelf tour, so we're liberating it and we're gonna give it a go. Another book I read and loved is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I always feel like I'm dramatic when I talk about his books, but you guys know I will walk to the end of the earth for this man. I just love his books. This is the haunted house, Amityville horror-ish homage in the sense that we have this family who lived at this house, Bainsbury Hall, right? Yes, I love when I get it right. And they lived there for 3 weeks and wound up fleeing in the middle of the night because of these really mysterious, unexplained things that were happening in the house. So the father wrote a book, a nonfiction book, that wound up becoming sort of this runaway bestseller in the vein of Amityville. And all these years later, the book opens and Maggie, who is the grown daughter, now she's grown, winds up inheriting the house from her dad after he passes away. So she doesn't really have a lot of memories of those couple of weeks living there. She sure as hell didn't know that her dad still had the house. And she happens to be a house flipper and fixer-upper. So she's like, whatevs, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna clean the place up, I'm gonna sell it, I'm done. Because she never really bought into her dad's book, which became this raging bestseller, and she always sort of felt like her life was built on a lie. So she's getting ready to go back up there. Her mom is like, don't do it, girl. Like, don't go. And she's like, whatever, I'm doing it. And sure enough, she gets there and things start to happen. But one of the very, very brilliant things in this book, and I feel like there's several, is that you get present day from Maggie, and then it's interspersed with the actual book her dad wrote, and you get like a literal book within a book. So like the font changes, and the book was called House of Horrors, and the way it's just woven together between what's happening in the present and what's in the book, I just loved it. I think this is just one of his best. Final Girls is still my favorite, which I will also recommend. I didn't pull it down from the shelf, Final Girls, but if you haven't read this one, it's so good. And there's definitely some real creep-tastic moments in that book. And I'm not one of those people who's gonna be like, this is what it is. You just gotta go in blind like I did. Loved it. Not that you have to, I mean, do whatever you wanna do, but I would recommend going into it blind. Okay, I've got a couple books that are multiples by the same author. So the first one is Simone St. James. So I read The Sundown Motel earlier this year, loved it so much. Multiple timelines, not mincing words. This is a ghost story. You know that out of the gate. This is not a is it, isn't it kind of a situation. And you have upstate New York in 1982 and then again in 2017. So Viv winds up working at the Sundown Motel and she like mysteriously disappears. And then in 2017, her niece Carly has never understood what happened to her aunt, and her mother would never talk about it. And when her mom passes away and Carly's feeling kind of lost and untethered, she decides to go to the Sundown Motel where Viv was last seen and try and figure out the mystery of her aunt. And history kind of starts repeating itself. This is jam-packed with so many amazing female characters. I loved it. This was one of those books where you didn't quite know when you flipped the page if it was going to be something that like was going to scare you out of your seat, or if it was like, no, this is totally safe to read at night. And when I was reading it, Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, she was like, don't read that one before bed because you just never know what's going to happen. And I was like, it's fine. And I was in a place, I was like, I'm in a safe place. And then I flipped the page and I was like, nope, 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 nope. So maybe by the light of day, depending on your threshold. And then I have The Broken Girls by Simone St. James, which I haven't read, which I'm excited for. So this is also dual timelines, which seems to be her thing. So we have Vermont in 1950, and then we have Vermont in 2014. So this is, there's a place for the girls whom no one wants. The troublemakers, the illegitimate, the too smart for their own good. It's called Idlewild Hall. So supposedly this boarding school is haunted. And then in the present day, we have a journalist whose elder sister's body was found in the overgrown fields near the ruins of Idlewild Hall. So it sounds like the same kind of mystery. I don't know, maybe ghosty. I'm pretty sure it's ghosty. I don't know for sure, but that is on my list as one I want to read. Okay, another author I have read, but I haven't read this book. This is The Whisper Man by Alex North. I read The Shadow Friend, which I really liked, which is also kind of like horror-y. There's some grief in it, there's some mystery in it, and this one sounds super creepy. This was his first book, and I was listening to I was watching somebody on BookTube, I don't remember who it was, but they were saying, like if you've read one, the other one will be familiar, but like they're similar in story. I don't know if that's true or not. So in this one, we have a guy named Tom Kennedy, and he's looking for a fresh start for him and his young son, Jake, because Jake's mom / Tom's wife has died. So they wind up going to this town called Featherbank, and the town has a very dark past. So 20 years ago, a serial killer abducted and murdered 5 residents in this town. And then he was finally caught, and he was nicknamed the Whisper Man because he would lure his victims out by whispering at their windows at night. So Tom and Jake start to settle in, and then sure enough, a boy vanishes. And I think this is like another like history repeating itself kind of a situation. So did they catch the right guy? Is the right guy imprisoned? We have like a copycat situation happening here. And then apparently Jake hears whispers in the window. I don't know. This sounds perfectly creepy to me, so why not? Another book that has been on my shelf for entirely too long, and I talked about it in one of my bookshelf tours, is The Furies by Katie Lowe. So this is You'd Kill to Be One of Them. So it says obsession, witchcraft, murder. And this is about a group of teens. So it says 1998. Again, I'm loving all these books set in the past. A 16-year-old girl is found dead on school property, dressed in white and posed on a swing. No known cause of death. 4 girls know what happened. They've kept their silence until now. So I don't know if this is like witchy vibes or like ghosty vibes. I mean, it says like witchcraft on the back, so like duh, but I don't know much about this. And I feel like I've said this before. I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot lately. I don't know if nobody's talking about this book because it just hasn't come across people's radar, or if it hasn't, just nobody's talking about this book. This came out a few years ago, 2019. So I don't know, I'm curious though, but again, witchcraft vibes, perfect for this time of year. Next up is a book I have read which completely freaked me out also, and it's called Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. Sorry, this has a glary cover too. I read this a few years ago. Julie from Pages and Pens was talking about this book, and I immediately went out to Barnes & Noble and picked it up like that day, and I read it and it completely freaked me out. So it says, anyone can follow the road, a few will leave it alive. So this is one of those books where once a year, a road appears in the forest. At the end of it, the ghost of Lucy Gallo beckons. Lucy's game isn't for the faint of heart. If you win, you escape with your life. But if you lose, ... So a year ago, our main character, Sarah's sister, disappeared, and Sarah wants to follow her sister's footsteps in this path that opens up once a year to find her sister. And this is told in like mixed media, with there's interviews, there's transcripts. It's kind of Blair Witchy. It winds up like Sarah's friends wind up meeting her and they go into the woods together and they are videotaping things on their phone. There's text messages, and the sort of mixed media of it all I thought was really interesting. It's definitely fast paced, and you've got past and present, and it definitely is just like, it was such a dark and messed up ride. I totally loved it. It's so creepy and atmospheric. This is one of those books that I would love to read again because I loved it when I read it, and I just, I'm like flipping through it and I'm like, yes, this totally just freaked me out and I loved it so much. And it was a book that I went into blind, and it was a book I didn't know if I was going to enjoy, and I wound up loving it so much more than I thought. I wound up giving it 5 stars at the time. So if you're looking for sort of a creepy Blair Witchy type of a feel, this one could be good for you. Another book I haven't read is Nun Shell Sleep by Ellie Marney. And I picked this up on a whim a while ago. And this sort of reminds me of The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So you have 2 teenagers. So this one is 1982. Oh, I feel like, do all bad creepy things happen in the 80s and 90s? So this one takes place in Quantico, Virginia. And we have 2 teenagers, serial killer survivor Emma Lewis and U.S. Marshal candidate Travis Bell, are recruited by the FBI to interview convicted juvenile killers to provide insight on cold cases. So Emma and Travis become good friends, and what happens, in a very Naturals kind of a way, is they wind up getting called in to give advice on an active case, and it's a serial killer who exclusively hunts teenagers. So working against the clock, they must turn to one of the country's most notoriously incarcerated murderers for help, teenage sociopath Simon Gutmanson. That's a name. So it sounds very much like they're up, like I said, like The Naturals, but like they're working for the FBI, they're helping to interview candidates. There's a live serial killer out there who's stalking teenagers. Emma is a teenager. She survived a previous serial killer, like Ken. Lightning strike twice, I'm guessing it's going to. The cover is like dastardly kind of, ew. But I'm excited for it. I haven't heard people talk about this one either, but I just feel like I don't have my pulse on a lot of books that people maybe were talking about. And, oh, this one's from 2020. Why did I feel like this was older than that? I don't know. What is time these days, right, guys? So anyway, sounds good. The next 2 books are also by the same author. I've read one of them. I haven't read the other. So the first one I did read, and this is The Chalkman by C.J. Tudor. And this is Everyone Has Secrets. This is the first C.J. Tudor I read. This is 2 timelines as well. So we have 1986 and 2016. Everyone says this is like It by Stephen King, which I haven't read. And C.J. Tudor fully admits that she's like completely inspired by him. So we follow a group of friends, and when they were younger, they used to just sort of like hang out together and bike around town. It was the 80s, and they used to leave messages for each other on their driveways in chalk drawings so they knew where to meet each other because, you know, like no cell phones, no texting. Welcome to the good life, friends. So one day when they're younger, one of those chalk drawings leads them to finding a dismembered body in the woods. So yeah, that happened. And then in present day, we have Eddie, he's back in town, and it's really like the past coming back to haunt you, and mysteries in the past and mysteries in the present, and being reunited with these friends. And it was so good, and it was creepy, and I just loved it. I just absolutely loved this. I read this a few years ago. This is another book I would love to read again. And then new CJ Tudor that I want to read is The Burning Girls. So I haven't read this one yet, and I've heard that this is definitely messed up, but definitely good. So we have a dark history at Chapel Croft. We've got a new Reverend, Jack Brooks, who is a single parent with a 14-year-old daughter and a heavy conscience. So she arrives in town for a fresh start, but instead Jack finds town rife with conspiracies and secrets, and is greeted with a strange welcome package, an exorcism kit, and a note that warns, quote, "But there is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known." So mystery, suspicions, there's just all sorts of dark and messed up things. It says ghosts in the town. I don't know if that's literal or figurative. And uncovering the truth can be deadly. So yeah, sounds good to me. I'm a fan of CJ Tudor. So I read The Other People. I haven't read The Hiding Place yet, but I have it. And I think that one is kind of Pet Sematary-ish, but I very much enjoy her writing, and I find her very interesting as a writer. So I'm excited for this. So the next book is Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesari. So I've talked about this one before, and Riley Sager recommended this in a podcast I was listening to. So of course I was like, check, because I will do anything he tells me to do. And this is a YA horror, and we've got sort of small town vibes. This girl named Quinn winds up moving there with her dad. Her mom has just passed away. This town is like a messed up past, and it sounds like people are just like trying to get out of it. So it says, Kettle Springs is caught in a battle between old and new, tradition and progress. It's a fight that looks like it will destroy the town until Friendo, the Bay Pen mascot, a creepy clown in a pork pie hat, goes homicidal and decides the only way for Kettle Springs to grow back is to cull the rotten crop of kids who live there now. So I don't know if this is like, it's like the opposite of Children of the Corn, where in Children of the Corn you're safe till you turn 18. This place sounds like you're doomed if you're a kid. So I've heard it's like epically creepy. That a clown in a pork pie hat, I don't know. I'm gonna work myself up to reading this one. So next up is The Missing Years by Lexi Elliott. I haven't read this one yet either. I read The French Girl that she wrote, and I totally want to read How to Kill Your Best Friend. But in the meantime, I already have this one. So this is about a woman named Alyssa Calder, and it says she returns to her childhood home, and she has inherited half of a house. The other half belongs to a man who disappeared without a trace 27 years ago, her father. She left London behind to settle this inheritance, returning to this manor, and it's in the Scottish Highlands, joined by the half-sister who's practically a stranger to her. Sorry, I'm reading the description because I don't know what it's about. So, super claustrophobic, Alyssa feels like the house itself is watching her. Her dramatic past hungers to consume her. She's terrified that she's not going to escape. So I don't know if this is like truly supernatural, in your head. I don't know. I, again, intentionally am trying not to read too much about some of these thrillers, but I've heard this one is super creepy too. And then the last ebook I have is The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. So this one came out earlier this year. This is supposed to be, I think, kind of Blair Witchy. And then it also says it pays an homage to Shirley Jackson. So this book follows a documentary filmmaker named Alice, and it says that she's been obsessed with the vanishing residents of this old mining town dubbed the Lost Village ever since she was a little girl. Because in 1959, her grandmother's entire family disappeared in this mysterious tragedy. And ever since, the unanswered questions surrounding the only two people who were left, a woman stoned to death in the town center and an abandoned newborn, have plagued her. She's gathered a small crew of friends to the remote village to make a film about what really happened, but there will be no turning back. So not so long after they've set up camp, mysterious things start to happen, equipment's getting destroyed, people go missing. They are not alone. They're looking for the truth, but what if it finds them first? So this is another one that I heard about from Abby at Crime by the Book. She raves about it. So I'm interested in this one for sure also. It just sounds nice and creepy. And that's the whole point. So that's gonna do it for a whole bunch of spooky books. I'm sorry I rambled on for so long, but let me know what you guys are looking forward to reading, what books freak you out, what books you would recommend I maybe check out if I'm looking to scare myself a little bit out of my seat. But I'm so ready for this time of year, you guys. So thank you so much for watching and hanging out today, and I will see you guys soon in another video. Take care, everybody. Bye.